All right, class. I'm going want to discuss this short story with you. It's one of my favorite of all time, uh, which may I don't know. Maybe it seems odd to you. I don't know, but I love this short story specifically as far as how well it's crafted and how symbolic everything is. So, as you know, as we've been looking over the characteristics of literature of this era, regionalism is extremely important, but regionalism has now changed. The artists and writers of this time are only using regionalism if it's integral to the point, if it's specifically symbolic. And I think, the regions we have described here are, basically this kind of country setting, um, versus the city where D's off of, and so you can see this is kind of um, how this is important, being south and rural and all that stuff because, Maggie, the daughter Maggie, is going to kind of represent that southern kind of country heritage where D represents kind of abandoning that heritage and going on to the city. Anyways, you probably know Alice Walker from The Color Purple, but in case you don't, that's her. Okay, so what you have in this short story here is everyday use is essentially kind of a big compare and contrast type situation. You have Maggie and Dee, two sisters. Maggie is very dark skinned, where and she's described as being not that attractive, mainly because she was burned, because of the sister D. And D is, a little bit more light skinned, a little bit more attractive in terms of sexuality, not as shy, and so there's already kind of a comparison uh, being laid out here that's pointing out this kind of unfair standard where society um, and different races in society, even within the African American community, tend to put a higher value, or at this time, put a higher value on being light skinned than dark skinned as far as African Americans go. And so and then there's also a comparison being made here because Maggie stays on the farm. She stays around the mom. She stays in the Christian church. She learns how to sew the quilts, which are going to become the main symbol in the story, and she does everything traditionally. She stays home, and then Dee goes off to the city, gets educated because everybody loved Dee. The church all pitched in to pay for it. She abandons the Christian church, takes on Islam. She comes back with that's a boyfriend who's got a Islamic name, and of course this or I'm sorry, an African name, and this all kind of goes to back to the 60s and 70s where um, a lot of people were trying to recapture the African heritage that was stripped away from them because of slavery. And so there was kind of like a reemergence, or I don't know, kind of a move to re-embrace that heritage. And that's what Dee's new name, Wangaro Luanika Kamanjo, comes into play, and also the name of her new boyfriend. And if you'll notice, a lot of the objects become symbolic. For instance, you notice that the title is everyday use, and it's because Maggie is the authentic daughter who is being true to her heritage. She knows, for example, that the grooves in the butter churn handle were created by a certain family member. She knows about the objects on the kitchen table, like the ladle and the butter, holder thing. And and for Maggie, all these things are more decorative. They're not to be used; they're to be put on display. Which brings us to the central kind of item of this short story, which is the quilt. And that's the one thing where Maggie's been burned because, Dee is a selfish little child that didn't like the place where she lived, the house that she lived in, even though her mom worked hard to pay for it. So she burned the house and danced while it burned, while her sister is in there getting burned up, permanently scarred. Um, and she doesn't know how to sew these quilts. She doesn't know the history of where they came from Grandma Dee. And, you know, Maggie learned that heritage. Maggie knows who made all these things. Maggie has taken part of it. And that's the one thing she won't let go. And, the issue is because Dee or Wangaro just wants to put them up on display. So in the city, she can tell our wealthy, educated friends, "Oh, look where I come from," and it's fake. It's all fake. She doesn't value it for what it actually is and the connection to family. She only values them as what they're worth and what they can, how she can put them on display as kind of like this fake idea of countryness. Like, look, I'm from the country. Here's my quilt, even though she doesn't know how to make the quilt. And you also have to understand the history of quilting. The history of quilting is very deeply rooted in the African American community because part of that kind of tribal life for many different tribes of people, not just African Americans, is sitting around in groups, making these. I don't want to say crafts because that undermines it, but making these objects that are important to heritage and tribal life. And quilting became uh, that and became heavily rooted in African American culture and just regular American culture in general, not just African American culture. But it was especially strong in African American culture and society. That's why this quilt is so important. I mean, there's like Native American tribes, there's African tribes, there's all kind, even the Scottish and their kilts. There's all kinds of things where you make these crafts and these designs have meaning, and they have symbolic meaning, and they kind of show where you came from. And quilts are kind of like evolved out of that. Um, so that's what we have here is basically we have Alice Walker, and she's showing you two different directions that these characters are going in terms of heritage. Now, before we judge Dee too harshly, I mean, her character is kind of a shite. But the fact that she's trying to recapture a heritage that she feels is lost to her is extremely valid. Um, she's not necessarily the villain of the story or the bad guy because she wants to come in contact with this old, this part of her heritage that's been erased. She's the bad guy because she's an ungrateful little shit, and she's got a kind of a mean, selfish spirit. So basically, Alice Walker here is showing you two kind of different choices or two avenues that many African Americans are going through at this time in history, and it's just wonderfully symbolic. It goes into the character psychology, which is coming out of modernism. You have that heavy regionalism. It's just it's brilliant. I just absolutely love this story, and I hope you enjoy it.